Let's start by saying the 2015 11-inch MacBook Air is absolutely still usable on a day-to-day basis. How does it compare to its contemporaries though, or even newer laptops? Well, let's find out. The standard model comes with 4GB DDR3 memory, a 1.6GHz Intel i5 dual-core, and 128 or 256GB of Apple SSD storage. The 11.6-inch glossy screen has a resolution of 1366 by 768, which is very low, but more on that later. The most striking thing about the laptop is its size. The design was brought out in 2010, and it's amazing how much they managed to fit inside, even 13 years ago. Apple never made a MacBook with a smaller screen, by the way. At its thinnest point, the laptop's just 3mm thick, however that goes up to 17mm at its thickest. As some of you may know, 2015 was also the year of the first 12-inch Retina MacBook, which was even thinner and lighter. This 11-inch has arguably a much better keyboard though, and is far closer in design to MacBook Pros of the unibody and Retina eras. So performance-wise, this thing surprised me a fair bit. I have the 2.2GHz i7 model, which is impressive for such a small device. That along with 8GB of RAM means running macOS Big Sur and even Monterey is no issue at all. Browsing the web was just fine, along with playing videos minimized and in full screen. I opened a fair amount of tabs and kept different apps open, and saw few slowdowns. That's likely thanks to the reasonably capable Intel processors these things come with. 2 cores is enough for everyday usage, but I'd avoid tasks like editing apps and things that require a lot of 3D rendering. Not only are the processors fairly old at this point, the graphics were never anything to write home about. The Intel HD 6000 integrated graphics can be beaten by almost any dedicated GPU released in the last 10 years. As well as being slow, the HD 6000 shares RAM with the processor, which leads to overall weak performance just because of the VRAM limitation. I mentioned the MacBook 12-inch that was released in the same year as the 2015 Air earlier. In a choice between the two, I'd go for the MacBook Air 9 times out of 10. Firstly, repairing the Airs is a million times easier. Battery, SSD, display, trackpad and keyboard are fairly simple parts to replace. Not only that, but they come in a lot cheaper. The MacBook 12-inch requires a lot of skill as well as money to repair, even with things like the battery, which is glued in place. The port selection on the Air is also a lot more convenient. Having 2 USB-A ports is a plus. MagSafe is too. I haven't had much use for Thunderbolt 2, but it's nice to have as an option for external connectivity. A whole host of newer MacBooks cut down on ports until recently. The MacBook 12-inch is objectively the worst of the bunch, with its 1 USB-C port. Let's not forget, every single MacBook 12-inch model came with a less powerful processor than our 11-inch i7 from 2015. So one drawback to this laptop is the screen, as I mentioned earlier. 768p is seriously low by any standards. It's worse than the 2006 black plastic MacBooks actually. The thing is, I don't think you're going to notice that. 11.6 inches is small as far as screens go. You have to get really close to see the individual pixels really, anyway. Watching films or playing games on this thing is not likely to be your main concern as well. The screen isn't big enough for films, and the parts aren't going to handle much more than flash games. Another thing worth considering is battery life. After 8 years, it's fair to say that most of the original batteries left in these things are all performing a bit worse than when they were new. Considering the whole laptop can be had for $150 if you're lucky, a £40 new battery is not such a bad idea. Battery life with a new battery should squeeze you through a day's work, or perhaps a half day more realistically, if you're constantly on it. Here's a couple of benchmark results for those interested. Single core scores on Geekbench 6 are far from disappointing. The i7 CPU is trading blows with some fairly competent machines, including the original Retina 15-inch Pro. Multi-core is where things get a bit messier, but it's fair to say for most basic tasks you're going to hold on just fine with this thing. Overall, this laptop is similar in quality to the 2014 13-inch MacBook Air I reviewed a few months back. There's something to be said about this smaller size though, especially with the i7 inside. If you're stuck between the two, go with the 11-inch. I don't think it matters if you have to get an i5 version. The portability of this tiny machine, as well as its ability to run one later update of macOS, makes it worth it. For tasks like office work, writing documents, or just getting through a day's assignments at school or college though. As always, thanks for watching one of my videos. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. I'm close to 1,000 subscribers now, and once I hit that mark I can make a bit of cash from these vids. To those already subscribed, see you next week.